Hey everyone, welcome back to another session of our CISSP study group. I'm B-Dubs and I'm excited to explore today's topics with you. Whether you're working towards the CISSP exam or you're just passionate about cybersecurity, you're in exactly the right place. I'm thrilled you're here. Whether you're preparing for that certification or just expanding your knowledge, you're making great progress. In our last session, we began Domain 6, Security Assessment and Testing, covering objectives 6.1 and 6.2. If you missed it, don't worry. There's a playlist available to help you catch up. I'll drop the link in chat now so you can watch it later at your own pace. Today we're tackling 3 objectives. 6.3, collecting security process data. 6.4, analyzing test output and generating reports. And 6.5, conducting security audits. These objectives focus on how organizations collect, analyze, and audit security data to maintain safety and compliance. Think of yourself as a security detective, gathering evidence from across your organization to evaluate its security posture. We're learning how to collect meaningful data, interpret it effectively, and conduct thorough audits to verify everything is secure. These are essential, practical skills that you'll use throughout your security career. And by the end of this session, you'll understand how to handle these tasks like a pro. So grab your monster, get comfortable, and let's get started. First up is Objective 6.3, collect security process data. Technical and administrative. Think of this as a health monitoring system for your organization's security. We're constantly checking vital signs to make sure everything is running smoothly and catch any issues early. This data collection forms the foundation for everything we'll cover today. Now there's 6 critical areas where we need to collect security process data. These are important for maintaining a robust security posture. First, we have account management. This tracks how we handle user accounts throughout their lifecycle. Next is management review and approval, which ensures proper oversight of our security processes. We also look at key performance and risk indicators. These metrics tell us how well we're doing. Backup verification is important because let's face it, backups are worthless if they don't actually work. Training and awareness is another important area. We need to know if our security education efforts are effective. Finally, we have disaster recovery and business continuity because we need to be prepared when things go wrong. We're going to dive into each of these areas in detail so you can see exactly what kind of data we need to collect and why it matters. Account management involves tracking our user account lifecycles from start to finish. Creation for new hires and contractors, privilege modifications for role changes and promotions, and then termination when employees depart. This systematic tracking prevents unauthorized access. Think about the risk of inactive accounts lurking in your system, just waiting to be exploited. By monitoring these metrics like last logon times, account statuses, and password change dates, we can identify and address any security risks. We track essential indicators such as percentage of privileged accounts reviewed quarterly, number of orphaned accounts detected, and average time to deactivate terminated employee accounts. When we spot an account that hasn't logged in for 90 days, we immediately flag and lock it. Our best practices include quarterly account audits, automated deactivation workflows, and seamless HR system integration to maintain tight security controls. Management review and approval is about systematically overseeing security decisions and processes. We use a combination of both full reviews and sampling to keep it manageable and effective. For our critical items, such as high-risk system changes or security exceptions, we review these 100%. For routine items like standard access requests, we're going to sample 10 to 20% of these requests quarterly to ensure proper approvals. There's a few key areas we monitor in our security processes. First, we review access request approvals and privilege changes to make sure people receive appropriate access. No more and no less. Next are the security policy exceptions and waivers. Since these are sometimes necessary, we must carefully track these to prevent vulnerabilities. We also monitor system configuration modifications. Anytime someone changes how our systems are set up, we need to know about it and make sure it's properly authorized. Finally, we review critical security incident responses to learn from previous issues and make sure that our responses were appropriate and effective. We track key metrics, such as time to resolve defects, percentage of reviews completed on schedule, and number of issues identified through reviews. For example, if a review reveals that it takes 2 weeks to fix a misconfigured firewall rule, we can streamline that process to just a few days. We also monitor how quickly teams implement corrective actions after reviews. These metrics show us how well our oversight works and where we need to improve. Key performance indicators, or KPIs, and key risk indicators, or KRIs, are our security scorecards that help us both measure and manage our security program effectively. Think of KPIs as your rear view mirror. They show you where you've been and how well you've performed. KRIs are like your forward radar. They warn you about potential risk ahead. Now let's talk about SMART metrics in the security context. This is really important because it helps us set clear, achievable goals. Here's how it works. First, we have specific. Instead of vague goals like reduce unauthorized access attempts, we set precise targets, like reduce failed logon attempts by 50%. See how much clearer that is? Next is measurable. We need concrete numbers, percentages, or time measurements to track our progress. If we can't measure it, we can't improve it. Then there's achievable. We need to set targets we can actually reach with our current resources. There's no point in setting impossible goals. You're just setting yourself up for failure. For relevant, every metric must align with our security goals and business needs. If it doesn't support our security strategy, then why even measure it? And finally, timely. Every goal needs a deadline. Without clear timeframes, projects will just drift endlessly and never get done. We need to know when we plan to achieve these targets. Now let's think about examples of how we measure both performance and risk in different security areas. For incident response, our KPI tracks percentage of incidents resolved within 24 hours. Last quarter, we hit 98%, beating our 95% target. Our KRI monitors high-severity incidents open beyond 48 hours. If this number starts climbing, it's a warning sign that our process might be breaking down. In patch management, our KPI measures critical patches applied within 72 hours, which shows our past performance. Our KRI tracks systems running versions with known vulnerabilities, helping us spot potential problems early. This forward-thinking metric helps us spot potential trouble before it becomes a problem. For access control, our KPI monitors whether we're completing our access reviews on schedule. Our KRI tracks accounts with unused privileged access, helping prevent excessive permissions. Organizations choose metrics based on their specific needs. Banks focus on data breaches, manufacturers on physical security, healthcare on patient data protection. The key here is selecting metrics that meaningfully track your security posture and warn you of emerging risks. Now we need to make sure our backups actually work through multiple verification methods, including collecting data from logs, running hash checks for integrity, and performing test restores at different levels. We test everything from file-level recovery to full system restores in test environments, and we verify application functionality after the restoration. Imagine needing to recover a file only to discover the backup is corrupted. That's the nightmare we're trying to prevent. We track metrics like number of backups verified, time between verification exercises, and total amount of data verified. Both incremental and full backups across different media types undergo this verification, with all restoration procedures and results carefully documented. For example, by verifying 50 backups monthly and conducting quarterly full restore tests, while managing backup window constraints and test environment resources, we build confidence that our data remains secure when that disaster strikes. Now let's talk about measuring our training effectiveness. It's important to make sure our security awareness programs deliver results. For our phishing awareness training, we track several key metrics. Our simulated phishing email click rates can tell a clear story. When rates drop down from 20% to 5%, we know our training is working. Staff are becoming more skilled at identifying suspicious emails. We also compare pre- and post-training assessment scores to measure the knowledge gained, while tracking module completion times helps us to optimize our content delivery. Employee feedback is also important. We need to know if the training resonates with our staff, if it's engaging, and if they feel it's helped them do their jobs better. Completion rates make sure we have comprehensive coverage across the organization. The ultimate measure of success is our security incident rates before and after training. This is where theory meets practice. We want to see fewer incidents following our training programs. We also measure broader security behaviors. For example, when 500 of our staff complete data handling training and our proper encryption usage rises 40%, that's concrete success. Likewise, decreased badge sharing incidents after physical security training also demonstrates effectiveness. Say 50 of those staff both report suspicious emails and properly secure sensitive documents post-training. That shows that our awareness program is building a security-minded culture. We collect data from disaster recovery and business continuity tests to make sure we're prepared for emergencies. There's two important metrics we need to understand. The recovery time objective, or RTO, which represents how quickly we can resume operations, and then the recovery point objective, or RPO, which represents the maximum acceptable data loss. For example, with a 4-hour RTO and 15-minute RPO, we must restore operations within 4 hours while losing no more than 15 minutes of data. Let's take a look at the key metrics we track to validate our disaster recovery plans. First, we monitor the number of successful DR tests per year. Regular testing builds confidence in our recovery capabilities. We also measure the percentage of critical systems covered by our DR plans, aiming for 100% coverage. Our mean time to recover, or MTTR, for various outage types helps us gauge our response speed across different scenarios. We track the number of plans covering each critical business process, since redundancy strengthens resilience. We carefully compare actual restoration times against our targets. This shows whether we're meeting our recovery objectives in real situations. For example, if testing shows we're back online in 3.5 hours against a 4-hour RTO, we're exceeding expectations. Beyond metrics, we document lessons learned from each test to enhance future performance. Regular updates to our test data should reflect changes in infrastructure and business requirements, keeping our DR and BC plans relevant and effective. That covers our approach to collecting security process data. We gather information from accounts, approvals, metrics, backups, training, and DR and BC to create a comprehensive view of our security health. But data collection is just the beginning. Now we'll explore how to analyze test output and generate reports. Let's move on to Objective 6.4. Now, an important part of security testing is transforming test outputs into actionable reports. This is where we convert the raw data into meaningful insights that drive real security improvements. The key is taking a systematic approach. We need to carefully review our data, evaluate impacts across the organization, determine any necessary actions, handle remediation professionally, and manage any exceptions that we find. Throughout this process, we must maintain strict ethical standards when we're disclosing our findings. Let's explore how these components work together to create a comprehensive analysis and reporting framework. Now, when we review our data, we need to make sure it's valid and makes sense. To do this, we need to understand a few key steps in our validation process. First, we verify data completeness by checking for any gaps in our scanning or collection processes. For example, during vulnerability scans, we confirm that every system in scope was actually scanned. Next, we validate data accuracy. If a vulnerability scan flags outdated software, we must first verify that the software is actually in use and not just sitting on a decommissioned server somewhere. Then we check for data consistency by by looking for unusual patterns, like an unexpected spike in failed login attempts at 3 in the morning. Finally, we establish our baseline context by understanding what normal looks like in our environment. Without this baseline, we can't effectively identify anomalies. This foundation of thorough data validation is important because all of our subsequent analysis and decisions depend on having accurate information. Now let's look at what's really at stake when we're analyzing our security findings. We need to consider 4 key impact areas affecting our organization. Financial impact includes any direct costs, such as incident response expenses and lost revenue from system outages or lost business. Operational impact affects our day-to-day business operations. Think of system downtime and employees unable to perform their jobs effectively. Reputational impact can be devastating, damaging our brand and eroding customer trust, which may take years to rebuild. Regulatory impact involves potential compliance violations and their accompanying fines, which can be substantial depending on the applicable regulations. We rate these impacts on a scale from low, with minimal disruption, to critical, with existential business threat, weighing both system criticality and issue severity. For example, a vulnerability in a public-facing server poses a much higher risk than one on an internal test machine, since it could simultaneously affect multiple impact categories. Now, after we analyze all of our findings, we need to create a clear action plan. This is where prioritization becomes important. We can use a risk-based prioritization framework to handle these issues. Critical issues pose direct threats to core systems or data, like exposed passwords or critical vulnerabilities. These should be remediated within 24 to 48 hours, no exceptions. High priority issues are significant vulnerabilities affecting important systems. Teams need about 1 week to address these, which is enough time to test fixes properly while maintaining urgency. Medium priority issues are notable problems with moderate risk. We allow 30 days for remediation, giving teams flexibility while ensuring accountability. Low priority issues need attention, but they aren't urgent. We set 90-day timelines, keeping them on the radar without treating them as critical. Now, for each issue, we need to make sure we document several things. First, we need a clear description of the problem. What exactly are we dealing with? Then we look at the resources and effort required. This helps us plan and budget effectively. Next, we outline specific implementation steps. Think of this as your roadmap to fixing the issue. We also need to identify any dependencies or prerequisites. What needs to be in place before we can start? Success criteria is important. How will we know when we fix the problem? And finally, we assign an owner and a timeline. Someone needs to be responsible for making this happen within a specific time frame. For example, if we discover an unpatched critical vulnerability, we'd mark it as critical priority, assign it to the infrastructure team, detail the patch procedure, list testing requirements, and then set a 24-hour completion target. Now, remediation is where we roll up our sleeves and actually fix things. Let's break down how we systematically approach remediation. When we're prioritizing our findings, we use several methods. First, there's CVSS scoring, a universal language for rating vulnerabilities. It uses a scale from 0 to 10, with scores from 9.0 to 10.0 considered critical. This helps us speak the same language when discussing vulnerability severity. We also use a risk matrix, which is a simple but powerful tool that maps the relationship between impact and likelihood, making it easier for us to communicate risk levels to stakeholders. We maintain clearly defined timelines for different severity levels. Now, these timelines will vary from organization to organization, but they have to be clearly documented and understood. For example, critical issues need addressing within 24 hours. These are your drop everything and fix it right now situations. High priority issues get a 72-hour window, medium priority issues get a week, and low priority items can wait until the next regular update cycle. These clear timelines make sure everyone understands what's expected. For example, a critical vulnerability with a CVSS score of 9.8 on a public-facing server gets patched immediately. while a low severity issue with a CVSS score of 3.2 on an internal system waits for the next update cycle. Now we have several key strategies that we use for remediation. First, patching and version updates serve as our first line of defense. When vendors discover vulnerabilities, they release patches that we must apply right away. Next, configuration hardening tightens system settings to reduce potential attack surfaces. Think of it like closing unnecessary windows and doors in your house. Then, network segmentation divides your network into separate segments to contain potential breaches and limit their impact, like having fireproof doors in a building so a fire can't reach a certain area. Access control adjustments involve reviewing and updating resource permissions, as well as removing excessive access that creates security risk. Finally, compensating controls provide alternative security measures when direct fixes are not immediately possible. For example, putting an unpatchable legacy system behind extra firewalls. Now, once we determine how we will remediate vulnerabilities, we must test these fixes with careful attention to detail. First, always validate your changes in a development test environment before touching production. This provides a safe space to catch any potential issues. Then make sure you have your rollback plans ready to go. Think of it as your safety net if something does go wrong, so you can quickly restore your systems to their previous state. We must also document every step. This documentation isn't just for you. This helps your team understand what was done and provides a future reference for similar situations. Finally, always verify that fixes actually worked through thorough testing. Don't just assume that everything is fine. We have to confirm the issue is truly resolved. For example, if a scan reveals servers with outdated software that's vulnerable to exploits, we'd prioritize sensitive data servers first, test our patches in development, implement with rollback plans ready, and document everything to reduce risk quickly while making sure we can repeat the process if we need to. Now let's be honest, not everything can be fixed perfectly. Sometimes you'll run into situations where a legacy application just won't accept a patch without completely breaking down. Rather than admitting defeat, we implement compensating controls and again document everything thoroughly. Here's the key compensating controls we'll commonly use in these situations. First, we might enhance our monitoring and logging to provide early warning signs if something is going wrong. We can also use network segmentation to isolate these vulnerable systems from the rest of our network. Sometimes we'll add additional access restrictions to limit who can interact with these vulnerable systems. MFA is another great tool for extra security layers. Finally, we might deploy IDS or IPS systems to catch suspicious activity before it becomes a problem. Now we have to be meticulous when we're documenting these exceptions. Every exception handling document needs a few key pieces. We need our risk assessment findings to demonstrate an understanding of what we're dealing with. We document any technical limitations that are preventing us from using standard solutions. We also need a solid business justification for accepting the risk. Why are we accepting this risk? Of course, we also need management approval signatures to show leadership understands and accepts the risk. Finally, we must set an exception expiration date. We don't want these exceptions hanging around forever. They're going to need regular reviews to check and make sure that they're still valid. This is risk acceptance in action. For example, if patching would cost $100,000, but the risk is low, we might implement a firewall rule instead, with management sign-off. Each exception undergoes periodic review, quarterly for high-risk items and annually for others. These reviews bring together security teams, system owners, and management to verify that exceptions remain valid and compensating controls stay effective. Now, when discovering a new vulnerability, we have to be really careful about how we handle disclosure. Here's how ethical disclosure works. First, always start with notifying the vendor privately. We provide a proof of concept demonstrating that the issue exists, but we do withhold full exploit details that could be dangerous if misused or if it falls into the wrong hands. Next, we give the vendor adequate time to address the problem. They need to develop and thoroughly test patches, as rush fixes can often create bigger problems. We follow established timelines, typically a 90-day disclosure window, though specific bug bounty programs might have different guidelines. This timeline provides vendors a reasonable deadline while maintaining pressure to fix the issue. Throughout this process, we coordinate closely with the vendor. Our goal is to protect users, which means working together to ensure vulnerabilities aren't exposed before patches are ready. Remember, public disclosure before patches are available puts users at risk. Being a responsible security professional means protecting the broader community. Now here's an example to tie it all together. Let's say a penetration test reveals that our password policy is weak. 30% of users have passwords like password123. We review the data to verify its accuracy and determine that this vulnerability could lead to account breaches, potentially costing millions in damages. We identify the need for stricter policy with complexity rules. Given the high risk, we set a 72-hour timeline for remediation. We fix the issue by updating the policy, conducting emergency staff training, and implementing MFA where legacy systems can't handle the new password requirements. A follow-up scan 2 weeks later shows that weak passwords have dropped to less than 1% of users. If we discover that the root cause is actually a flaw in our authentication software, we ethically disclose it to the vendor. This shows how analysis transforms data into actionable solutions. Now that we've collected and analyzed our data, how do we verify that everything has worked? That's where audits come in. Now let's shift gears to objective 6.5. Security audits serve as a comprehensive health check for your security program. They verify that our controls are working effectively and meeting required standards, while providing concrete evidence that our security measures deliver results. These audits not only demonstrate regulatory compliance, but they also play an important role in identifying security gaps and highlighting opportunities to strengthen our security posture. Now let's look at how they work. We've got 3 distinct types of audits, with each one serving a specific purpose in a comprehensive audit program. Internal audits are conducted by our own team. They're cost-effective and leverage our in-depth system knowledge, though potential bias is a consideration here. Examples include reviewing access logs, conducting vulnerability scans, and checking patch compliance. These audits often help us prepare for more formal evaluations. External audits involve either us auditing a vendor or someone outside of our organization auditing us. While they provide unbiased assessments, they require careful coordination and a clear definition of the scope. Examples include evaluating a cloud provider's security controls, assessing vendor compliance with our security requirements, and reviewing a partner's incident response procedures. Third-party audits bring in independent professionals, typically a hired firm, for enhanced credibility, often to meet compliance requirements. Though these are more expensive, these audits are widely trusted because they follow formal methodologies. Examples include SOC 2 reports, ISO 27001 certification audits, and PCI DSS compliance assessments. They provide the highest level of assurance to stakeholders. Now, audits are a key piece of our security strategy, and our security team supports them every step of the way. Most audits follow this systematic path, guided by standards like ISO 19011. First, we define the objective. Why are we doing this? It might be to meet GDPR requirements or validate our incident response capabilities. We document this in a formal audit charter with stakeholder sign-off. Next, we set the scope. What exactly are we examining? This could range from just payment systems to the entire IT infrastructure. We include clear boundaries and establish a risk-based sampling methodology. Then comes the audit itself, the real meat of it. The lead auditor assembles the team, including subject matter experts, and creates a detailed plan. We test controls by sampling logs, interviewing staff, and gathering evidence like configurations and screenshots. Every step gets documented in the audit trail. After testing, we document all of our findings, both the good and the bad, and share them with the stakeholders in formal reports. Finally, we refine the process. The audit team, led by the lead auditor, evaluates effectiveness. We might identify needs like better evidence preparation or tighter schedules, and then adjust for the next time. For example, we might aim to validate our disaster recovery plan by scoping it to critical servers, testing with a mock outage, collecting uptime statistics as evidence, and then adjusting based on any delays we encounter. Preparation is so important. We update documentation, train staff, and maintain clean logs. Our security team provides essential support by granting access, explaining controls, and addressing any gaps identified post-audit. Now I want to take a look at SOC, which stands for System and Organization Controls. These audit reports provide independent third-party assurance about an organization's controls. They're important for demonstrating trustworthiness to clients and stakeholders. These standards have evolved from SAS 70 to SSAE 16 and now to SSAE 18 in the United States, with ISAE 3402 serving as the international equivalent. There's different types of SOC reports you need to understand. SOC 1 deals with financial reporting controls. These are important for accountants and financial auditors, but they're not our primary focus as security professionals. SOC 2 is the most relevant for us, focusing on the 5 trust services criteria, which includes security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. Security is the foundation that makes sure we have strong protections against unauthorized access to our systems. Availability makes sure that our systems are accessible when needed and that they're actually up and running. Processing integrity is about accuracy and timeliness. Are our systems processing data correctly? Are they doing it when they're supposed to? Can we trust the output? Confidentiality is where we prove that we're protecting sensitive data as promised. And then privacy specifically addresses how we handle and protect personal information, making sure we're following all the proper procedures and respecting individual privacy rights. Now there's something interesting here about SOC 2. Organizations don't have to include all 5 criteria. They can pick and choose which criteria are relevant for their business. Another thing to keep in mind is that these reports contain sensitive control and system information, so access to these must be carefully restricted. SOC 3 serves as a public-friendly version of SOC 2, which is perfect for marketing as it provides a high-level overview of the results of the SOC 2 report without revealing any sensitive details. Now, both SOC 1 and SOC 2 come in 2 different types. Type 1 reports take a snapshot of controls at a specific moment in time. They answer, do we have the right policies and procedures? Auditors examine documentation, written policies, system configurations, and control descriptions explaining how your controls are designed to work. Type 2 reports go much deeper and evaluate control performance over a 6 to 12 month period of time. They answer, are these policies in place and actually working? Evidence includes system logs showing consistent security measures, change management documentation for your systems, and incident response documentation. SOC 2 Type 2 reports are considered the gold standard. Imagine proving to your clients that your encryption has worked flawlessly for a full year. Many organizations combine this with frameworks like ISO 27001 to provide even more comprehensive assurance. So who's actually involved in this audit process? There's several key roles that work together to make these audits successful. Our executives set the tone from the top. Without their support, both in budget and priority, audits won't be effective. They must demonstrate that security audits are a serious organizational priority. Then we have the audit committee, which typically consists of board members and senior leadership. They're responsible for overseeing the entire audit program. They review results, approve major changes to the audit process, ensure auditors maintain independence, and report the most critical findings back to the board. The security officer, or CISO, plays an important role by developing the overall audit strategy and making sure audit findings align with our security objectives. For example, they might identify the need to audit VPN logs after noticing suspicious remote access patterns. Our compliance manager handles the practical aspects of the process, scheduling audits, bringing in the right professionals, and making sure we stay compliant with all of our regulatory requirements. Think of them as the audit program's project manager. Our internal auditors are our own team members who test the controls and identify any gaps. They work closely with IT teams and process owners to understand how our systems and processes truly operate. We also bring in external auditors. These are the independent professionals who provide unbiased assessments. Their objectivity is critical for maintaining stakeholder trust. When they say something's working or not working, people will believe it. Finally, our support teams complete the picture. IT provides technical access for the auditors. Legal makes sure compliance requirements are met. Business unit managers coordinate departmental access. And process owners explain how their systems and workflows operate. For example, the CISO might initiate a patch audit. The compliance manager books the audit firm. And security helps auditors dig into the logs, while IT provides system access and process owners explain their control implementations. It's truly a team effort to lock in our security. Now let's recap the 3 main objectives that we've covered today. For Objective 6.3, we explored collecting security process data, from account information and approvals to metrics and backup statistics. Think about those failed login attempts we discussed. That's the kind of data collection that strengthens our security posture. Objective 6.4, we examined test output analysis and report generation. It's not enough to just collect the data. We need to make sense of it. Tools like CVSS scores help us determine which vulnerabilities need immediate attention versus those that can wait. Finally, with Objective 6.5, we dove into security audits, from internal reviews of access logs to external SOC 2 certifications. We saw how different audit types serve unique purposes in validating our security controls. These elements work together in a continuous cycle. Data feeds analysis, which then audits validate. Keep practicing and maybe even try conducting a mock audit or analyzing some vulnerability scan results. Now that wraps up Objectives 6.3, 6.4, and 6.5 today. And now we've conquered Domain 6. You're crushing the CISSP journey. Keep up that amazing momentum. If you need to go back and review anything, it's no problem. These recordings will stay on YouTube, and I'll add chapters after the stream for easy navigation to topics. Mastering these concepts is a huge milestone towards your CISSP certification. And since they're fundamental principles, you'll see them pop up throughout your career. Remember to connect them to real-world scenarios. Stay curious and keep practicing. You're doing fantastic. Now, who's ready for the after party? I'm heading to our Study GRC Discord server's CISSP voice channel right now. It's the perfect space for deeper discussions, questions, and connecting with the community. If you haven't joined our Discord yet, you can visit cissp.britwhite.io for the Discord link. And then don't forget to grab your CISSP role when you join to get full access to our study channels. Our next session will be Saturday, May 17th at 3 p.m. U.S. Central Time, where we'll get started with Domain 7, Security Operations. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in Discord.